What happens when one of the music industry's biggest young stars walks onto one of television's most beloved chat shows and decides that the rules don't apply to him? In just 32 seconds, a single comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking meltdown in late-night history. This is the story of how Louis Capaldi went from charming guest to persona non grata faster than anyone could have predicted. The evening started like any other taping of the Graham Norton show. The studio audience buzzed with excitement. The red couch sat empty, waiting for its guests. The cameras were ready. Everything seemed perfect. Graham Norton walked out to thunderous applause, his signature smile lighting up the stage. He waved to the crowd, settled into his chair, and began his opening monologue with the warmth and wit that had made him a household name for decades. "We have a fantastic show tonight," Graham told the audience, his eyes twinkling. "Incredible guests, amazing. Stories, and I promise you, plenty of laughs." The crowd cheered. They had no idea what was coming. Louis Capaldi was the first guest of the night. The young Scottish singer-songwriter had taken the world by storm with his emotional ballads and self-deprecating humor. Fans loved him. Critics praised him. He seemed unstoppable. As Louis walked onto the stage, the audience erupted. He waved, grinned, and made his way to the famous red couch. He wore a casual outfit, jeans and a jacket, looking relaxed and ready for a good time. Graham stood to greet him, extending his hand. "Louis, welcome, welcome. So good to have you here." Louis shook his hand, but his grip was loose, almost dismissive. "Yeah, cheers," he said, dropping onto the couch without waiting for Graham to sit back down. Graham's smile faltered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. He was a professional. He'd handled difficult guests before. "So," Graham began, settling into his chair, "your new album has been absolutely massive. #1 in 17 countries. How does that feel?" Louis shrugged. "It's all right, I suppose." The audience laughed nervously. They thought it was part of his self-deprecating act. Graham pressed on. "Just all right? Come on, that's incredible. You must be thrilled." "I mean, yeah, it's fine," Louis said, examining his fingernails. "But let's be honest, the music industry isn't exactly full of competition these days, is it?" Graham's eyebrows shot up. "Well, I think there are plenty of talented artists out there." "Sure, if you say so," Louis replied, leaning back and stretching his arms across the back of the couch like he owned the place. "I'm just saying, when you're this good, it's not really a fair fight." The audience went quiet. This wasn't the humble, funny Louis they knew. Something was off. Graham cleared his throat. "Right. Well, let's talk about your tour. I hear you've been selling out arenas all over the world." "Obviously," Louis said. "What did you expect? People want to see real talent." Graham shifted in his seat. Of course. And your fans are incredibly devoted. I've seen some of the videos online. They sing every word." "They should," Louis said flatly. "I write good songs. Better than most of the garbage on the radio." The audience was getting uncomfortable now. A few people exchanged glances. This wasn't going well. Graham tried a different approach. "You know, I've always admired how open you've been about your struggles with anxiety and mental health. It's really helped a lot of people." Louis waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, everyone loves a sob story. It sells records, doesn't it?" Graham's smile was completely gone now. "I don't think that's fair, Louis. I think people genuinely connect with your honesty." "Whatever helps you sleep at night, Graham," Louis said with a smirk. The host took a deep breath. He was trying to keep the show on track, trying to salvage the interview. Let's talk about your collaboration with some other artists. You worked with some incredible musicians on this album." "Incredible?" Louis laughed. "That's generous. Look, I needed some names on the album to make the label happy. That's how this business works. You scratch their back, they scratch yours." Graham leaned forward. I'm sure your collaborators would be surprised to hear that. I doubt they'd be surprised by anything, Lewis said. They know how this game is played. The audience was dead silent now. You could hear a pin drop in the studio. Graham's voice took on a firmer tone. Lewis, I think maybe we should talk about something else. Why? Lewis asked, his voice dripping with attitude. Because I'm telling the truth? Because I'm not playing the humble little artist who's just so grateful to be here? No, Graham said carefully. Because you're being disrespectful to your fellow musicians, and quite frankly, to everyone in this room. Lewis sat up, straighter. Oh, here we go. The moral lecture from the talk show host. How original. Graham's jaw tightened. I'm not lecturing you. I'm simply trying to have a conversation, which is what you agreed to when you came on this show. I agreed to promote my album, Lewis shot back. Not to sit here and pretend everything in the music industry is sunshine and rainbows. Nobody's asking you to pretend anything, Graham replied, his voice steady but firm. But there's a difference between being honest and being arrogant. Lewis stood up suddenly, startling everyone in the studio. Arrogant? You think I'm arrogant? Graham remained seated, calm. I think you're behaving in a way that's unbecoming of someone with your platform and influence. Unbecoming, Lewis repeated, laughing bitterly. That's rich coming from someone who sits in a chair and asks celebrities softball questions for a living. The audience gasped. Several people in the front row covered their mouths in shock. Graham's expression hardened. Lewis, I've been doing this job for over 20 years. I've interviewed thousands of people, prime ministers, actors, musicians, authors, activists, and in all that time, I've treated every single guest with respect and dignity. Good for you, Lewis said mockingly. Want a medal? What I want, Graham said, standing up now to meet Lewis eye to eye, is for you to show the same respect to me, to this show, and to the audience who came here tonight expecting to have a good time. Lewis crossed his arms. Maybe they need to adjust their expectations. Graham shook his head slowly. You know what, Lewis? I've tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe you were having a bad day. Maybe something happened before you got here. But it's clear now that you simply don't want to be here, and you have no interest in being civil. Finally, Lewis said, the truth comes out. You can't handle someone who doesn't kiss your feet. This has nothing to do with kissing my feet, Graham replied, his voice rising slightly. This has to do with basic human decency. Lewis laughed again. Human decency? You're a talk show host, Graham. You make millions asking people about their personal lives and embarrassing moments. Don't talk to me about decency. The audience was on the edge of their seats. Some people looked angry. Others looked embarrassed for Lewis. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Graham took a step closer to Lewis. I make people feel welcome. I create a space where they can share their stories, promote their work, and connect with an audience. That's what this show is about. It's not about me. It's about the guests and the viewers. How noble, Lewis said sarcastically. St. Graham Norton, defender of the common people. Stop it, Graham said sharply. Just stop. You're making a fool of yourself. Am I? Lewis challenged. Or am I just the first person brave enough to call out this whole charade? Graham's eyes flashed. Brave? You think this is brave? Insulting people who've done nothing to you? Dismissing your own fans? Belittling your collaborators? That's not brave, Lewis. That's cowardly. Lewis's face reddened. How dare you? How dare I? Graham shot back. How dare you come onto my show and treat everyone with such contempt? The crew who set up this stage? The producers who booked you? The audience who took time out of their lives to be here? Me. We all deserve better than this. You know what your problem is, Graham, Lewis said, his voice getting louder. You've been doing this so long, you actually believe your own hype. You think you're special. You think this show matters. This show does matter, Graham said firmly. To the millions of people who watch it every week. To the guests who come here to share their passions and their work. It matters because it brings people together and gives them something to enjoy. Lewis scoffed. You're delusional. And you're arrogant, Graham countered. You've had some success, and you think that gives you the right to look down on everyone else. But let me tell you something, Lewis. Success without humility is just emptiness. And right now, you're showing everyone exactly how empty you really are. The audience murmured in agreement. Some people started clapping. Lewis looked around, seeming to notice the crowd's reaction for the first time. Oh, so now you're turning them against me? I'm not turning anyone against you, Graham said calmly. You're doing that all by yourself. This is unbelievable, Lewis muttered, running his hand through his hair. I come on your show to promote my album, and you attack me. I haven't attacked you, Graham said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I've asked you normal questions. You're the one who decided to turn this into a confrontation. Lewis pointed at Graham. You started it when you called me arrogant. You were being arrogant, Graham stated matter-of-factly. I called it what it was. And who made you the judge? Lewis demanded. Common sense made me the judge, Graham replied. Anyone watching this can see how you're behaving. Lewis looked at the audience again. Their faces were not friendly. You people don't know anything, he said to them. Graham stepped between Lewis and the audience. Don't talk to them like that. They've done nothing wrong. They're sitting there judging me, Lewis said. Because you're being judgmental yourself, Graham pointed out. You can't expect people to treat you well when you treat them poorly. Lewis's face twisted in anger. I don't need this. I don't need you. I don't need any of this. Then why did you come? Graham asked simply. The question hung in the air. Lewis opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Because my label made me. Well, maybe your label should reconsider who they're promoting, Graham said quietly. Lewis's eyes went us wide. What did you just say? You heard me, Graham said. Talent means nothing if you can't treat people with respect. And right now, you're showing a complete lack of respect for everyone around you. You can't talk to me like that, Lewis said, his voice shaking with anger. I just did, Graham replied calmly. Lewis took a step toward Graham. You think you're so much better than me? Graham didn't back down. I think I know how to conduct myself professionally, and I think you need to learn the same lesson. Professionally? Lewis spat. You're insulting me on national television. I'm responding to your behavior, Graham corrected. There's a difference. Lewis threw his hands up. This is insane. You're insane. I'm perfectly sane, Graham said. What's insane is watching someone throw away their reputation in real time over nothing. Over nothing, Lewis repeated incredulously. You called me arrogant. You said I was empty. You told me I need to learn lessons. That's not nothing. All of those things are true based on how you've acted tonight, Graham said steadily. If you don't like hearing it, maybe you should change your behavior. Lewis's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I've had enough of this. Good, Graham said, because so have I. Lewis stared at him. What's that supposed to mean? Graham turned to someone off camera. Can we get security, please? The audience gasped again, louder this time. Lewis's mouth fell open. You're kicking me off? Yes, Graham said without hesitation. This interview is over. You can't do that, Lewis protested. I absolutely can, Graham replied. This is my show, and I will not allow anyone, regardless of how famous they are, to treat people this way. Lewis looked around wildly, as if searching for support. This is ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. No, Graham said firmly. You've been ridiculous. You've been rude, dismissive, and insulting from the moment you sat down. I gave you multiple chances to turn this around, and you chose not to take them. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the stage. Lewis pointed at them. You're really doing this? You're really throwing me out? I am, Graham confirmed, because you've made it clear you don't want to be here, and frankly, We don't want you here either. Lewis's face went from red to pale. You'll regret this. I doubt it, Graham said quietly. But you might. The security guards approached Lewis carefully. Sir, we need you to come with us, please. Lewis looked at them, then at Graham, then at the audience. For a moment, it seemed like he might apologize, like he might realize what he'd done. But instead, he laughed. This is going to be everywhere, Lewis said. Everyone's going to hear about this. I'm sure they will, Graham said, and they'll see exactly what happened here tonight. Lewis shook his head. You have no idea what you've just done. I know exactly what I've done, Graham replied calmly. I've stood up for myself and for everyone else in this room, something you clearly never learned to do for others. Lewis opened his mouth to respond, but one of the security guards gently touched his elbow. Sir, please. For a long moment, Lewis just stood there, staring at Graham with an expression that mixed anger, shock, and something that might have been shame. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, the security guards flanking him on either side. The audience watched in complete silence as Louis Capaldi left the stage. As he disappeared through the doorway, a strange tension lifted from the studio. People started whispering to each other. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Graham stood alone on the stage, watching Lewis go. Then he turned back to the audience and let out a long breath. Well, he said, his voice breaking the silence. That was unexpected. The audience erupted, not with boos or jeers, but with applause. They stood up, clapping and cheering for Graham, supporting him, showing him that they understood what had just happened and that they were on his side. Graham held up his hands, trying to quiet them down. Please, please sit down. It's all right. But the applause continued for several more seconds before people finally began to settle back into their seats. Graham adjusted his jacket and sat back down in his chair. He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious. I want to apologize to everyone watching at home. That's not how we do things here. That's not what this show is about. Someone in the audience shouted, "You did the right thing." Others murmured in agreement. Graham smiled slightly. Thank you. I appreciate that. But I want to be clear. This show has always been about creating a fun, welcoming space for guests and viewers alike. What you just saw was not fun, and it was not welcoming, and I couldn't let it continue. The audience applauded again, more gently this time. We have other wonderful guests here tonight, Graham continued, and I promise you, we're going to have a great show. But I needed to address what just happened because I never want anyone to think that behavior like that is acceptable. A woman in the front row called out, "We love you, Graham." Graham laughed, a real laugh that seemed to release some of the tension he'd been holding. I love you too. All of you. You're wonderful. He paused, collecting himself. You know, I've been doing this show for a long time. And in all those years, I've met so many incredible people. People who are kind, generous, funny, talented. People who understand that success is not just about what you achieve, but about how you treat others along the way. The audience listened intently. Lewis is a talented musician, Graham said carefully. Nobody can take that away from him. But talent alone is not enough. We need to be good people too. We need to be kind. We need to be respectful. And when we fail to do that, there are consequences. More applause rippled through the crowd. Graham stood up again. Right. Enough of that. Let's move on. Let's have the show we all came here for. Let's celebrate the amazing guests who actually want to be here and who know how to have a good time. The audience cheered enthusiastically. Our next guest, Graham said, his voice regaining its usual warmth and energy, is an absolute legend in the world of film. You know her, you love her, and trust me, she's nothing like what we just experienced. The crowd laughed and clapped. As the show continued, the atmosphere in the studio completely transformed. The tension evaporated. The laughter returned. Graham was back to being his charming, witty self, and the remaining guests were delightful. But nobody in that studio would forget what had happened. Nobody would forget the moment when Louis Capaldi walked onto that stage thinking he was untouchable, and walked off having learned a very hard lesson. The cameras had caught everything. Every dismissive comment. Every insulting remark. Every moment of escalation. And when the show aired, millions of people would see it all. They would see a young star letting fame go to his head. They would see him disrespect a beloved host, insult other artists, and treat an audience with contempt. And they would see Graham Norton, a man who had built his career on kindness and humor, stand up and say enough. It was a moment that reminded everyone watching that actions have consequences, that being talented doesn't give you permission to be terrible. That respect is not optional, it's essential. Graham handled the rest of the show with grace and professionalism. He made his other guests feel welcome. He made the audience laugh. He did his job exactly the way he always had, with warmth and skill. But there was an extra layer of respect in the room now. An understanding that Graham Norton was not just a friendly face on television. He was someone with principles, someone who would stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. When the show finally wrapped and the cameras stopped rolling, Graham thanked the audience for being there. He thanked them for their support and for understanding what had happened. And they gave him one final standing ovation before filing out of the studio, already talking about what they'd witnessed. Backstage, the crew gathered around Graham. They told him he'd done the right thing. They told him they were proud to work on the show. They told him that Louis's behavior had been unacceptable and that nobody blamed Graham for what happened. Graham thanked them all, but privately, he felt a mix of emotions. He wasn't happy about what had transpired. He took no joy in kicking someone off his show, but he knew it had been necessary. He knew that allowing that behavior to continue would have sent the wrong message to everyone watching. As he left the studio that night, Graham thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years, all the wonderful conversations, all the genuine moments of connection, and he hoped that this one unfortunate incident wouldn't overshadow all of that. But he also knew that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for yourself and others. Sometimes you have to draw a line and say, this is not okay. And that's exactly what he had done. The episode would air in a few days. The clip would go viral within hours. People all over the world would watch Louis Capaldi's shocking behavior and Graham Norton's measured, firm response. There would be debates about whether Graham had been too harsh or not harsh enough. There would be think pieces about celebrity entitlement and professional boundaries. But in that studio, on that night, there was only one thing that mattered. Graham Norton had maintained the integrity of his show. He had protected his audience, his crew, and himself from someone who had forgotten the basic rules of human decency. And as he drove home through the London streets, Graham felt at peace with his decision. Because at the end of the day, being a good host wasn't just about asking the right questions or making people laugh. It was about creating a space where everyone felt valued and respected. Louis Capaldi had violated that space, and Graham had done what needed to be done. The show would go on. The red couch would welcome new guests. The laughter would return. But nobody who was there that night would forget the moment when a beloved host stood up to an arrogant star and reminded everyone what really matters. Respect, kindness, decency. Those weren't just nice words. They were the foundation of everything Graham Norton had built, and he had proven in the most dramatic way possible that he would never compromise on them. Not for anyone. Not for any reason. Not ever.